The prince's mansion was surrounded by Imperial guards, tightly sealed off with no gap for escape. This was the harbinger of confiscation of property and annihilation of the entire clan. My husband, Prince Jing, Xiao Jue, was no doubt pacing in frantic despair in the front hall at this very moment. And I, his forsaken wife, the one he had cold-shouldered for 3 full years, stood leisurely in the treasury, gazing upon mountains of gold, silver, and jewels piled before me. In my previous life, I had accompanied him into exile, depleted my entire dowry, devised strategies on his behalf, and helped him rise from a convict to the pinnacle of power once more. Yet on the very day he ascended the throne, what he bestowed upon me was a cup of poison wine. Now, I have been reborn, on the day before the mansion was to be raided. Xiao Jue has been reborn as well. He imagines he can make amends and lead me through another dazzling ascent to glory. But gazing at the boundless mystical space that appeared in my mind upon my rebirth, a space that can hold anything without limit, I smiled. This time, his glory had nothing to do with me. All I wanted was to strip him of everything. Your Highness, all is ready. A low, raspy voice sounded from behind me. I turned and saw Chen, my personal bodyguard. He was tall and powerfully built, clad in black. A fearsome scar ran from his brow to the corner of his mouth across his face, lending his already stern features an even fiercer, more intimidating air. I had pulled him from a heap of corpses 3 years ago. Since then, he had become my shadow, utterly loyal, silent as stone. In my previous life, it was on the road to exile that he had been torn apart by wolves while saving me from their jaws, dying a gruesome death. He was the only person in this world, aside from my long-departed parents, who had ever treated me with genuine sincerity. In this life, I could cast aside anyone else. But him, I would keep by my side and protect with everything I had. Chen, are you afraid? I looked at him and asked softly. He shook his head, his gaze unwavering. My life belongs to your Highness. I smiled, and my eyes stung with the threat of tears. Good. I said no more. I reached out my hand toward a towering coral tree that shimmered with gold, so massive it would have taken 4 men to lift it. With a single thought, that colossal coral tree vanished into thin air. In Chen's usually placid eyes, shock erupted like a tidal wave. His eyes flew wide, yet he clamped his jaw shut, not a sound escaping him. He simply stared at my hand in disbelief. I offered no explanation. I simply continued. Collect. Chests upon chests of neatly stacked gold ingots. Collect. Boxes of luminous, perfectly round Eastern pearls. Collect. Masterpieces of calligraphy and painting from bygone dynasties hanging on the walls. Antique jade vessels on the shelves. Rare furs piled in the corners. Whatever caught my eye vanished with a single thought. This was the miraculous space that had appeared in my mind upon my rebirth, a world with infinite storage, containing fertile fields, a flowing stream, and even a small courtyard house. It was heaven's compensation for my wrongful death in the past life. And it was my capital for exacting blood debt from Xiao Jue. In less than half an hour, the once opulent, kingdom-rivaling treasury of Prince Jing's mansion stood utterly bare, so empty that even a rat would leave weeping. Let's go, Chen. On to the next. I led him onward with a clear goal, the kitchen and grain stores. Gold and silver were hard currency, but food was the very foundation of survival. On the exile road in my previous life, we had eaten grassroots and gnawed on tree bark. That bone-deep hunger was something I never wanted to experience again. Rice, flour, oil, salt, dried poultry and fish, bundled vegetables, jars of wine. Like an industrious hamster, I left nothing behind wherever I went. The cooks dropped to their knees in terror, convinced they were seeing ghosts in broad daylight. I didn't spare them so much as a glance. After emptying the granaries, I went to my own small residence, the Heart's Rest Court. This had been my dwelling after I fell out of favor. It held all the dowry I had brought from my maiden family. those precious heirlooms, rare manuscripts, and my mother's jewelry, all of which I had sold off in my former life to bribe and pave Xiao Jue's way. This time, they would belong to me alone. I even uprooted the osmanthus trees in full bloom from the courtyard and transplanted them into my space. By the time I finished, the sky beyond was streaked with pale dawn. The Imperial guards had surrounded the mansion all night. Xiao Jue, waiting in the front hall, must have been beside himself with anxiety by now. And indeed, Xiao Jue was frantic. But not about the impending raid. It was me he was worried about. In his previous life, at this moment, he had been running about like a headless chicken, bribing every connection he could, yet he still failed to stop the exile and confiscation. But in this life, he had been reborn. He knew that this raid was merely the Emperor's warning shot, a move to curb his power, not a genuine death sentence. All he had to do was submit meekly and surrender his military authority, and he would earn a comparatively dignified sentence of exile 3,000 li away. And that very exile was the launching pad for his return to glory. So he was not alarmed in the least. He sat in the front hall, sipping a cup of tea long gone cold, replaying the trajectory of his previous life in his mind. In that life, the massive show of force had terrified him. He had blamed me, believing my presence had distracted him, and subjected me to endless humiliation. On the exile road, he had heaped abuse on me, both verbal and physical. Only later, when I used my wits and my family's connections to rebuild his path step by step, from a disgraced criminal back to the heart of power, did he begin to treat me with some measure of regard. But so what? When he took the throne, he needed a woman of illustrious lineage to be his empress, to consolidate his rule. And I, the daughter of a disgraced minister, the wife who had endured hardship alongside him, became the most unsightly stain on his glorious ascent. Xin Yan, for the sake of the realm, I must ask you to bear this sacrifice. The poison wine had barely touched my lips before his cold words fell upon my ears. Now, reborn and brimming with guilt, he had come prepared to compensate me. He would show me deep affection right from the start, so that I would be utterly devoted to him and willingly serve him once more. Your Highness, the hour grows late. What of the princess? The steward ventured cautiously. Xiao Jue snapped back to the present. A smile he deemed tender spread across his face. Yes, I should go see Nyener. She has a timid heart, she must be terrified. He rose, straightened his robes, adopted his most devoted expression, and set off toward my heart's rest court. He had already rehearsed his speech. He would hold me tight, tell me not to be afraid, that he would handle everything. He would promise that no matter what lay ahead, he would never abandon me. He would show me his strength and his devotion. He would make me see him as my only light in this darkness. With such thoughts, he pushed open the gate to Heart's Rest Court. And then, the smile on his face cracked apart, inch by inch. The courtyard was empty. Not a trace of the trembling, helpless figure awaiting his salvation. There was nothing, not even the stone tables and stools, the orchids in the corners, the wind chimes beneath the eaves, and even the flagstones paving the ground had vanished, leaving only bare, yellowish earth. It was as if a plague of locusts had passed through, no, more thorough than locusts. Xiao Jue was dumbfounded. He rubbed his eyes violently, wondering if his rebirth had addled his mind. But the sight before him was so starkly real that a chill crept into his heart. He stumbled into my bedchamber. Empty. The carved canopy bed, dressing table, wardrobe, antique shelves, all gone. Only bare walls remained, and a window frame creaking in the morning breeze. Xin Yan! Xin Yan! His roar turned hoarse and wild, filled with shock and fury. The steward and servants scrambled in after him. At the sight of this eerie emptiness, they fell to their knees, convinced a ghost had haunted the mansion. Where is she? Where is the princess? And that mute guard of hers? Xiao Jue seized the steward by the collar, his eyes bloodshot. Why, your highness. This servant has no idea. the steward stammered, half dead with terror. All was well last night. How could it have vanished in the blink of an eye? Xiao Jue shoved him aside and burst out of the courtyard, tearing through the mansion like a madman. He went to the treasury, empty. He went to the granary, empty. He went to the kitchen, empty. He went to the armory, empty. The entire Prince Jing's mansion appeared to have been licked clean by some invisible beast. Except for the immovable pavilions and buildings, every single valuable, usable, or edible item was gone. At last, in a corner by the back gate, he spotted a patch of still damp blood and a familiar cuff button, a Chen's. Xiao Jue's mind buzzed. A terrifying thought took shape. Xin Yan had fled with that damned guard, taking every last scrap of the mansion's wealth with her. No. Impossible. She was a woman of no physical strength. How could she, under the heavy siege of Imperial guards, have spirited away an entire mansion's worth of goods in silence? It defied reason. This was not the script of his rebirth. Pfft. Seething fury, compounded by a sleepless night, sent a wave of blackness before Xiao Jue's eyes. He spat a mouthful of blood and crumpled backward. Your Highness. The mansion descended into chaos. Outside, the Imperial Guard commander had grown impatient. With a wave of his hand, he bellowed, "The hour is come. Seize the property." Meanwhile, inside the space, Chen and I sat on the threshold of our new home, each holding a steaming bowl of meat porridge. Time in this space seemed to flow differently from the outside, or perhaps I, as its master, could control it. When we had entered, it was dawn. But now, the space was bathed in warm, sunlit spring. Before our small courtyard stretched endless tracts of rich black soil, with a crystalline stream meandering through and wildflowers blooming along its banks. Distant mountains rose in layered shades of green, wreathed in mist like a scene from paradise. Your Highness, the porridge. Chen picked every chunk of meat from his bowl and placed it into mine, leaving himself only the plain rice porridge. I shook my head and put the meat back into his bowl. Chen, don't call me Your Highness anymore. I looked at him, speaking with earnest gravity. Call me Xin Yan. Or Nian Nian. His hand, holding the chopsticks, paused. Across that fearsome face, an unexpected flush crept up. He dropped his gaze and muttered, "This subordinate dares not." And why not? I pushed the meat into his mouth. From now on, there is no princess and no guard here. Only you and me. We are family. Family. Chen's chewing slowed, his eyes reddening at the edges. He was an orphan who had lived by the blade since childhood, never once knowing the warmth of a home. I patted his shoulder. Eat up. We have much to do when we're done. After the meal, we began planning our new life. I sorted through the various seeds I had collected from the mansion stores and prepared to till the land. Chen retrieved axes and tools from the armory and set about building a water wheel by the stream, as well as fashioning new furniture for our small courtyard. He was surprisingly dexterous. In our past life on the exile road, he had repaired the shabby thatched hut we lived in, piece by piece. He had even carved a hairpin for me out of wood, rough and simple, yet the most heartfelt gift I had ever received. We divided the tasks and worked with cheerful energy. As I sowed rice, wheat, and corn seeds into the black soil, they sprouted, shot up, and flourished almost before my eyes. This land seemed to possess a divine power that vastly accelerated the growth cycle of crops. Chen's work progressed just as swiftly. Before long, an ingeniously crafted wooden water wheel took shape by the stream. Gazing upon this vibrant scene of new life, and thinking back to the bitterness and betrayal of my former existence, a profound sense of peace and joy filled me as never before. No schemes, no power struggles, only honest toil and reaping. This was the life I truly wanted. Xin Yan. A Chin walked up beside me, hesitating. What is it? He pointed toward the edge of the space, that blurry, chaotic borderland, and said gravely, something is stirring outside. I focused my attention. The space and I were linked by mind. I could sense the outside world in broad strokes. I closed my eyes and extended my awareness outward. My consciousness drifted like a thin mist, hovering above the now-ruined Prince Jing's mansion. The raiding Imperial guards had withdrawn, leaving devastation in their wake. Anything of value in the mansion had been scraped down to the bedrock. Well, not quite. They had found nothing of value at all. Because everything truly precious was already inside my space. I imagined the priceless expressions on those guards' faces when they stormed into the empty treasury, and I nearly laughed aloud. A gaunt, haggard figure crawled out from under a collapsed gatepost. It was Xiao Jue. He looked utterly wretched. His royal robes were filthy and torn, his hair disheveled, and his face caked with dried blood and dust. He stood dazed in the middle of the ruins, his gaze hollow, as if he had lost his very soul. The Imperial Edict of Exile had already been issued. He was stripped of his title, reduced to a commoner, and ordered to be escorted out of the capital 3 days hence, exiled 1,000 li away to the desolate frontier city known as Misty Miasma. This mirrored the trajectory of his previous life exactly. But in that previous life, although he was exiled, I had sold off my dowry to fill an entire cart with gold, silver, and fine goods for him. I had also bribed the escorting officers so he suffered little hardship on the road. In this life, he had nothing. Not a single copper coin to his name. He had fallen overnight from a prince of high estate to a convict more destitute than a beggar. Xin Yan. Xin Yan. He muttered, his voice scraping like a broken gong. Where are you? Why did you do this to me? He couldn't understand it. He couldn't accept it. In the script of his rebirth, I was supposed to be the faithful wife who never abandoned him, the wise counselor who would help him rise again. But I had torn up that script. Not only had I not helped him, I had stripped away every last one of his resources at his moment of greatest need. Without startup capital, without my strategies, his road back to the summit would be 100 times harder than before. At that thought, a wave of satisfying vengeance washed over me. Xiao Jue, this is only the beginning. Every last drop of what you owe me, I will make you repay, with interest. The creaking prison carts rolled out of the capital. Xiao Jue, his hands and feet in shackles, was crammed in among a crowd of disheveled prisoners, reeking of sweat and filth. The guards showed him no respect, a lash of the whip came at the slightest provocation. What are you staring at? Former Prince Jing, are you? So what? Now you're just another prisoner like the rest of us. A burly prisoner spat at him. Never in his life had Xiao Jue endured such humiliation. His eyes blazed with fury, but there was nothing he could do. Without money to bribe anyone, he was nothing but a dog to be kicked around by guards and prisoners alike. His stomach gnawed with hunger. The coarse steamed bun thrown to him by a guard was hard enough to crack stones. He had barely taken a bite when another prisoner snatched it from his hand. He thought back to his previous life. On that same exile road, he had ridden in a comfortable carriage, eating hot meals I had prepared with my own hands, while I trudged along beside the wheels through mud and mire. Back then, he had taken it for granted. Now, karma had arrived. Xin Yan. Once again, he whispered my name in his heart. This time, it was no longer rage or confusion that colored his thoughts, but a tinge of regret, faint as it was, that he himself scarcely acknowledged. If only he had treated her better. No. There were no if only-s. The bewilderment in his eyes slowly faded, replaced by a venomous ruthlessness. Xin Yan, you wait. When I rise again, I will find you. And then, I will make you kneel before me and beg for my forgiveness. I watched that splendid spectacle and withdrew my consciousness with great satisfaction. Chen was standing behind me like a silent guardian. He is faring very poorly, Chen said, his voice a little dry. He deserves it, I replied coldly. Chen said no more. He silently handed me a freshly peeled apple. The fruit from the space was sweet and juicy, far surpassing anything from the outside world. I took the apple, bit into it, and the last trace of gloom in my heart dissolved. Chen, should we go out now? I asked. Hiding in the space forever was not a solution. We still needed a legitimate identity, a foundation upon which we could establish ourselves in the outside world. Moreover, I wanted to witness with my own eyes how arduous Xiao Jue's road to recovery would be, without my help. Chen nodded. Whatever you decide. After some discussion, we settled on Xiao Jue's destination of exile, Misty Miasma. The most dangerous place is the safest. He would never dream that rather than fleeing from him, I would go right under his nose. Besides, Misty Miasma was a frontier town teeming with all sorts of outcasts, perfect for unregistered people like us to start anew. Having made our decision, I focused my will and brought Chen out of the space with me. Outside, we stood on the same desolate hillside. I got my bearings and set off along the main road toward Misty Miasma. We chose not to appear directly in the city, so as to create a plausible story. From the space, I retrieved a modest horse-drawn carriage, 2 strong horses, and ample money and changes of clothing. Chen drove the carriage while I sat inside, disguised as a pair of siblings traveling to the frontier to seek relatives. From that day forward, the abandoned princess of Prince Jing's mansion, Xinyan, ceased to exist. There was only an ordinary woman named Xinyan. Misty Miasma lived up to its name. Situated at the border between 2 warring kingdoms, it suffered perennial conflict and harsh climate. The city was a melting pot of exiles, desperate refugees, mercenaries living by the sword, and foreign merchants. Chaos was the only order. Chen and I arrived without drawing a second glance from anyone. With a few bits of silver, we rented a small storefront with a backyard in a remote corner of the western part of the city. Once settled, the first thing we did was to inquire about Xiao Jue. The exile convoy arrived more than 10 days after us. By the time they reached Misty Miasma, only about 30 of the original 100 remained. Along the way, they had perished from illness, starvation, or taken their own lives under the torment. Xiao Jue was still alive. But he was living a life worse than death. He was assigned to the harshest labor, mining. Every day, before dawn, he descended into the pits. Only after nightfall did he emerge. He ate swill fit for pigs, slept in crowded barracks, and at the slightest hesitation, the overseer's whip came down on him. The once exalted prince had become a mining slave to be bullied by anyone. Rumor had it that upon arrival, he still carried himself with princely airs, until the overseer strung him up and beat him for 3 days straight, leaving him half dead. That taught him better. He had grown silent, his gaze dark and predatory, like a lone wolf biding its time for a chance to strike back. And that chance, he had had it in his former life. In that life, shortly after arriving in Misty Miasma, I had used our last funds to bribe the mine supervisor, freeing him from hard labor and getting him a comfortable position as a bookkeeper. Then, using border trade, I earned our first fortune, recruiting soldiers and reconnecting with his old allies. Every step of his restoration had been paved with my money and my blood, sweat, and tears. And now, I sat in my newly opened Shin's eatery, clicking an abacus as I listened to customers gossip about that unlucky former prince in the mines, and a cold smile curved at the corner of my mouth. Xiao Jue, without me, let's see how you turn things around this time. Shin's eatery opened for business. We sold simple fare, steaming hot meat-stuffed buns and a large pot of fragrant mutton soup. In a place like Misty Miasma, to eat one's fill and keep warm was the ultimate luxury. Our buns had thin wrappers and generous fillings, 1 bite sent juice running down the chin. Our mutton soup was rich with ingredients, topped with a sprinkle of scallions, Its aroma carried halfway down the street. Best of all, the prices were fair. The eatery became an instant hit. Before dawn each day, a line would form at the door. Laborers hauling goods at the docks, miners toiling underground, and city garrison soldiers all became regulars. I handled the kitchen and the cash. A Chin sat by the entrance like a guardian deity. His scarred face and powerful build were the best advertisement imaginable. No street thug dared to cause trouble. The days passed. Business thrived, and our savings grew. With the profits, I bought a larger storefront on Misty Miasma's busiest street, East Avenue. We no longer sold just buns and soup. We introduced something novel, hot pot. A bubbling pot of crimson chili oil broth, with paper-thin slices of beef and lamb, and fresh vegetables. This new, lively way of eating took the city by storm. Shin's hot pot became the most fashionable establishment in Misty Miasma. Whether high officials, wealthy merchants, or foreign traders, all considered it an honor to dine there. A Chen and I transformed from unremarkable siblings from elsewhere into the universally known Boss Shin and Brother Chen. We acquired our own residence and loyal staff and even established connections with the city lord's household. The city lord's wife was a devoted patron of my hot pot restaurant. All of this, in just 1 year. And in that same year, Xiao Jue was still struggling in the mines. Not that he hadn't tried to fight back. He had attempted to leverage his knowledge of the past. By predicting a mining accident, he saved several workers' lives, hoping to win their loyalty. Yet those very miners turned around and sold his ability to foresee the future to the mine owner for a few coins of reward. The mine owner had him arrested and tortured, believing he practiced sorcery. Half beaten to death, Xiao Jue finally understood that loyalty was not so easily won. Without the glue of mutual benefit, favors were worthless. He tried to contact his old allies in the capital. But he had no money, not even enough to hire a messenger. A letter he entrusted to someone vanished without a trace. Those former subordinates who had once sworn allegiance had long since found new patrons after his fall. One failure after another ground away the last of his pride. He came to resemble a true mine slave, numb, silent, his eyes holding only dead emptiness. Occasionally, he overheard other miners talking about Shin's eatery. Heard about that? Shin's has a new dish, something called spicy crayfish. So good you'll swallow your own tongue. Not only that, their iced jelly dessert is heavenly. A bowl of that in summer, and you'd refuse to trade it even for godhood. That Boss Shin is something else, I tell you. They say she and her brother came to Misty Miasma just a year ago, and now she's the richest person in town. Aye, and she's a beauty too, like a celestial maiden, but that brother of hers is terrifying. Stands there like a mountain, and no one dares so much as glance his way. Boss Shin. Shin Yen? Brother. A Chen? Xiao Jue's heart felt as if it had been pierced by something sharp. Was it him? Was it her? Impossible. How could a woman of no physical strength make such a name for herself in a place like Misty Miasma? Must be a namesake. He comforted himself thus, but the thought took root like wild grass and grew. He wanted to see. He had to see for himself whether this Boss Shin was truly her. To get a day's leave from the mine, Xiao Jue used 3 months' worth of his meager wages to bribe a supervisor. He put on clothes that were relatively clean, hiding his wounds as best he could, and walked into Misty Miasma's busiest street, East Avenue. This place was a world apart from the mining district. The streets were wide and tidy, lined with prosperous shops, bustling with people, a scene of vibrant prosperity. He found Shin's hot pot almost immediately. It stood 3 stories tall, ornate, imposing, magnificent. 2 large red lanterns hung by the entrance. The signboard bore the word Shin's hot pot in bold, flamboyant calligraphy, clearly the work of a master. Before he even drew near, an irresistible, rich aroma assaulted his nostrils, stirring his hunger into a frenzy. He stood at the street corner, gazing at the grand entrance, and was seized by a strange reluctance to approach. He saw countless well-dressed patrons walk into the restaurant with smiles. He saw waiters busily greeting customers, their faces beaming with genuine cheer. He saw a familiar yet foreign figure sitting behind the counter, eyes lowered as she worked an abacus. She wore a simple, elegant sky-blue dress, her hair pinned up with a plain wooden hairpin. Her face, free of powder, bore a serene, contented smile. She was a little thinner than in the prince's mansion days, but her complexion was infinitely better. The old weariness and oppression had vanished from her brow. Instead, there was a radiant confidence. It was her. It truly was her. Shen Yan. Xiao Jue's breath caught. He had imagined that without him, she would be destitute, regretful, that she would weep and come crawling back. He had replayed their reunion countless times in his mind. He would look down upon her from on high and demand why she had betrayed him. Then, amid her tears of remorse, he would magnanimously forgive her and take her back under his wing. But the sight before him shattered every fantasy. Without him, she was doing better. So much better that it made him burn with envy and rage. Just then, a burly figure emerged from the kitchen, carrying a bowl, and walked straight to the counter. It was a Chen. The menace radiating from him was even heavier than in the prince's mansion days, yet the look he gave her was tender enough to melt stone. He set the bowl before her and said in a low, doting voice, "Nian Nian, I made you some snow fungus soup. It'll soothe your throat." Nian Nian. He dared to call her Nian Nian. Xiao Jue's fists clenched instantly, his nails digging deep into his palms. As if I had sensed something, I looked up. My gaze cut through the crowded street and landed squarely on that disheveled figure standing in the corner. Our eyes met. I saw in his eyes shock, rage, resentment, and a hint of shame at having his illusion shattered. I smiled faintly, picked up the bowl of snow fungus soup that Chen had brought, and took a slow, deliberate sip with the spoon. Then, I formed words with my lips, silently, directly at him. You lost. Xiao Jue read my lips. A surge of humiliation and fury rushed to his head. He wanted to charge over, grab my shoulders, and demand by what right. By what right did I enjoy such comfort and luxury while he rotted in the mines like an animal? By what right did I have another man by my side while he was utterly alone? By what right could I cast him aside so easily, so completely? But his feet felt rooted to the ground. He couldn't take a single step. He looked at his own threadbare, washed-out clothes, and then at the elegantly dressed patrons inside the restaurant. He dared not enter. In his current state, he did not even have the right to set foot through that door. A crushing sense of inferiority and resentment gnawed at his heart like twin serpents. Just as he stood there, lost and broken, Chen had already spotted him. Chen's gaze turned glacial. He stepped in front of me, shielding me with his body, like a male lion defending his territory, radiating a deadly aura. Scram. Chen said only one word, quietly, but carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds. Xiao Jue recoiled from the killing intent in those eyes. Only then did he realize that the Chen before him was no longer the silent guard he had once kicked around at will. His bearing, his eyes, they had become utterly fearsome. Xiao Jue had no doubt that if he took one more step forward, Chen would snap his neck without hesitation. Humiliation. Defeat. Powerlessness. Xiao Jue shot me a venomous glare, as if he wanted to devour me alive. Then he turned and fled, disappearing around the corner. Watching his retreating back, my smile deepened. Nian Nian, don't look at him, Chen said, a little sullen. He'll dirty your eyes. I turned to him, his worried expression making me laugh. Jealous? Chen's face went crimson in an instant, even his ears burned red. He stammered, I'm not. I'm just afraid he might hurt you. He can't hurt me. I shook my head and took his hand. Chen, with you here, I fear nothing. His palm was broad and rough, calloused from years of gripping his sword, yet it was warm, and that warmth was my anchor. Held by my hand, Chen went rigid as a wooden post. Looking at his bashful innocence, I felt both amused and deeply moved. This was the man I had chosen. Loyal, dependable, and placing me at the very heart of his world. Nothing like Xiao Jue, whose love was forever laced with calculation and cost-benefit analysis. Come. Let's not let someone irrelevant spoil our mood. I tugged him back into the backyard. There, our chickens pecked at grains with contented clucks. The grapevine by the wall had climbed all over its trellis, hanging with clusters of crystal-clear fruit. Life was peaceful and beautiful. Xiao Jue returned to the mines. That encounter had stirred him deeply. He no longer languished in numbness. He began to climb with desperate determination. He used every means at his disposal, currying favor, eliminating rivals, sowing discord. All the schemes from his previous life he now deployed within the small arena of the mining camp. He was, to be fair, quite capable. Within 6 months, he rose from the lowest mining slave to the rank of overseer. He no longer had to descend into the pits. His daily work was to crack his whip and supervise others. He ate well, dressed warmly, and even gathered a few followers. His first act was to come to me. This time, he did not linger at the street corner, he walked straight into Shin's hot pot. He wore a new overseer's uniform, whip at his belt, followed by 2 flunkies, the picture of petty arrogance. Shin Yan, let's talk. He stood before the counter, looking down at me. I didn't even raise my eyes, continuing to click my abacus. There's nothing to talk about between us. Xiao Jue's expression stiffened. He had thought his new status would earn him at least a second glance. Instead, I remained cool and indifferent. Shin Yan, don't be so ungrateful. One of his flunkies blurted. Our boss is the mine overseer now. He's doing you a favor just stepping into this shabby joint. Smack! A crisp sound rang out. Chen had appeared before the man and sent him flying with one slap, crashing into a table. Watch your mouth. Chen's voice was ice cold. The other flunkey's legs turned to jelly. He dropped to his knees and began slapping his own face. Xiao Jue's face darkened like thunderclouds. This was a direct slap in his face. Chen! You insolent cur! He roared. Don't forget, you were nothing but a dog in my prince's mansion. Now, he is my man. Finally, I looked up and fixed him with a cold stare. And you, Xiao Jue, are nothing but a convict I can't even be bothered to look at. Take your dogs and get out of my restaurant. Or I won't mind having you carried out horizontally. My voice was not loud, but everyone in the restaurant heard it clearly. The diners set down their chopsticks and watched the drama unfold with relish. Xiao Jue's face cycled through shades of red and white. He wanted to retaliate, but a glance at Chen's murderous eyes and the waiter's poised to step in made him swallow his rage. He knew that starting a fight here would only hurt him. Fine. Just fine. He ground out through clenched teeth. Shin Yan, just you wait. One day, you'll regret this. With that, he turned and slunk away, his 2 humiliated flunkies trailing behind. Xiao Jue's revenge came swiftly. Leveraging his overseer authority, he began harassing our business. He sent his men to eat and drink at our establishment without paying. He spread rumors that our ingredients were tainted and had poisoned customers. He even bribed local thugs to cause trouble in our shop. For a time, our business suffered a noticeable blow. The staff grew anxious, but I was not the least bit worried. These petty, underhanded tactics were like children's games to me. For those who came to freeload, I instructed the staff to serve them well, but charged every penny to Xiao Jue's account. As for the rumors, I simply invited the city lord's wife. In front of the entire city, I had her sample our dishes and personally tour our spotless kitchen. If the city lord's wife herself praised our establishment, who would dare to say otherwise? The rumors collapsed. And the thugs? That was even simpler. A Chen, accompanied by a few capable men, invited those thugs to the burial grounds outside the city on a moonless night. No one ever learned what happened that night. But from then on, every gangster in Misty Miasma gave a wide berth to anyone associated with Shins. Xiao Jue's petty machinations not only failed to harm us, they became a laughingstock, eroding the little credibility he had built in the mines. He became the city's biggest joke. 2 more years passed. In those 2 years, a Chen's and my business empire grew ever larger. Shin's was no longer just a hot pot restaurant. We opened a full-scale restaurant, a fabric shop, a courier agency. Our enterprises spread across the entire city and into surrounding towns. We had become the undisputed, uncrowned rulers of Misty Miasma. And a Chen and I were now husband and wife. There was no lavish wedding, just a few tables of wine in the backyard for close friends. That night, he had drunk a great deal, holding me close and murmuring over and over, "Nian Nian, my Nian Nian." This silent, taciturn man, only before me did he reveal all his tenderness. Xiao Jue, meanwhile, had not fared well. After repeated failures in the mines, he finally realized that he could not rise again on his own. So he chose another path. Using his memories of the past and his still handsome face, he ingratiated himself with the daughter of Misty Miasma's garrison commander. That commander was an incompetent fool but full of ambition. Xiao Jue played to his desires, advising him on military matters and helping him win a few minor victories, earning the commander's deep trust. In the end, he became the commander's son-in-law. He had finally escaped the mines and once again donned fine robes. He believed he had regained the upper hand. Having become the commander's son-in-law, the first thing he did, once more, was to come to me. This time, he was not alone. He brought a squad of fully armed soldiers. They surrounded my Shin's main branch and burst in with a menacing show of force. "Shin Yan, I'll give you one last chance," he said, standing before me with a complicated look. "Come with me. I will overlook everything you've done. I'll even make you my secondary wife." He thought this was a great favor. After all, my current husband was merely a lowly former bodyguard. Whereas he was the son-in-law of a commander who held military power, and his future was boundless. I looked at that self-satisfied face and found it utterly absurd. Secondary wife? I laughed as if I had heard the funniest joke in the world. Xiao Jue, has mining debris addled your brain? What makes you think I would covet the position of a secondary wife? You. His face darkened again. Shin Yan, don't be so ungrateful. I am now the deputy garrison commander of Misty Miasma. With one word, I can turn all your businesses to dust. Is that so? I gave a cold laugh. Then by all means, try. The moment my words fell, a lazy voice drifted down from the stairway. Oh my, and who might be speaking so boldly? Why, it's Deputy Commander Xiao. The city lord, his round belly protruding, descended the stairs at a leisurely pace. Behind him followed several foreign merchants. Seeing the city lord, Xiao Jue's expression shifted instantly. The garrison commander and the city lord of Misty Miasma had always operated like water and oil, one controlling military affairs, the other civil administration. But anyone with eyes knew that in this city, the one who truly held the reins was the city lord, who appeared as mild as a Maitreya Buddha but wielded immense power and cunning. Lord, city lord. Xiao Jue hastily saluted, his bluster deflated. The city lord did not even glance at him. He walked straight to me and said with a genial smile, "Boss Shin, this new Buddha jumps over the wall dish of yours has been making my mouth water. Come, set up a private room for me and these distinguished guests. Right this way, Lord City Lord." I smiled and made a gesture of invitation. From beginning to end, we treated Xiao Jue as if he were invisible. He and his soldiers stood awkwardly in the middle of the main hall, unable to stay or leave. His threats had become an utter joke in the presence of the city lord. Indeed, he was now a deputy commander with troops under his command. But my businesses sustained nearly half the population of Misty Miasma. My caravans had opened trade routes with the western regions, bringing the city lord's treasury an astronomical sum in tax revenue each year. To move against me? That would mean moving against the very lifeblood of the entire city. The city lord would never allow it. Xiao Jue clearly grasped this as well. His face was black as ink. He stared at me with a glare of pure defiance, as if his resentment alone could manifest into something solid. He could not understand why. How could I so effortlessly defuse every attack he launched? How could I always be one step ahead? He did not know that what I possessed was far more than wealth and connections. I possessed a world of infinite possibilities. After being publicly humiliated by the city lord, Xiao Jue kept a low profile for a while. He seemed to have finally realized that on the turf of Misty Miasma, he could not touch me. So he turned his gaze back toward the capital. Using the garrison commander's military power and the trade routes opened by our caravans, he secretly accumulated strength, recruiting soldiers and building up arms. Simultaneously, he fed information to the capital, fanning discord between the new emperor and his brothers. Soon, chaos erupted in the capital. Several princes fought bloody battles for the throne. Border wars flared, leaving the court in utter disarray. This was the opportunity Xiao Jue had been waiting for. 3 years later, word arrived from the capital. The old emperor had died. The crown prince and the third prince had clashed before the funeral bier, leaving both sides decimated. With no sovereign, the realm descended into civil war. Xiao Jue raised the banner of clearing the sovereign side, pacifying the nation's calamity. With the 100,000-strong army he had built over the years on the frontier, he marched in force upon the capital. He succeeded. Leveraging his memories of the past and the strength he had amassed, he swept through the internal strife like a thunderbolt and ascended to the throne he had so long coveted. When the news reached Misty Miasma, I was in the backyard teaching our 2-year-old son to babble. "Mama. Mama." The little one gurgled indistinctly, drooling all over me. Achin crouched beside us, carefully wiping his mouth with a goofy, adoring grin. Hearing the servant's report, I was not the least surprised. That Xiao Jue had reached this point was entirely within my expectations. After all, he too was a man reborn, and he carried the protagonist's aura from his past life. "Madam, then what of us?" The steward looked at me with concern. Now that Xiao Jue had become emperor, if he decided to move against us. "Fear not," I said with a smile, stroking my son's head. "If he dares come, I'll make sure he doesn't stay on that throne for long." I was no longer the helpless discarded wife he could manipulate at will. Over the years, using the resources from my space and Achen's martial prowess, I had not only secured my position in the business world, I had secretly cultivated a force of our very own. That force spanned the realm, embedded in every trade and industry. Xiao Jue believed he held the realm in his grasp, but he did not know that half of his empire rested upon the foundation of my commercial empire. If I wanted to topple him, a flick of my finger would suffice to collapse his entire economy. After his coronation, Xiao Jue did not come for me immediately. He was busy, eliminating dissent, consolidating power, pacifying the realm. He had become a competent emperor, cold, decisive, ruthless. He filled his harem with beauties and made the daughter of his former prime minister his empress, to win over the court. It seemed he had forgotten about me. But I knew he hadn't. For a man with his obsessive need for control, I was his one and only loose end. The more successful he became, the more he could not tolerate my existence as a blot on his record. Sure enough, in the second year of his firm rule, he came. Not by proxy, but in person, at the head of an imperial expedition. Under the pretext of inspecting the frontier, he marched to misty miasma with tens of thousands of imperial guards. This time, his display was grander than ever before. He would receive me, as the son of heaven. He would show the entire realm that I, Shen Yan, would ultimately return to his side. He would use this to wash away all his past humiliations. The entire city of Misty Miasma was placed under martial law. The city lord, along with all officials, knelt at the city gates to welcome the imperial presence. Xiao Jue rode a splendid white horse, clad in dragon robes, his expression grim. His gaze swept over the kneeling crowd, but did not find the figure he sought. "Where is Shen Yan?" he asked, his voice devoid of warmth. The city lord replied tremblingly, Your Majesty, Boss Shen is unwell, and could not come to receive you." "Unwell?" Xiao Jue sneered. "Does she dare not come, or does she deem me unworthy?" Without another word to the officials, he spurred his horse into the city and rode straight toward my residence. The imperial guards surrounded my house until not a crack was left unguarded. Xiao Jue dismounted and kicked open the vermilion gate. He expected to see my face, pale with fright. Instead, what he saw was a courtyard, empty. Exactly as it had been in Prince Jing's mansion all those years ago. The rooms were stripped bare, not a stick of furniture left. In the backyard, the chickens, the grapevines, all gone. I, a Chen, our son, and all our loyal servants had vanished as if plucked from the earth. "Shen Yan!" Xiao Jue's cry tore through the air once more. But this time, the sound held not just anger, but a note of panic. Of course I wouldn't be foolish enough to wait for him. The moment his army set out, I had received word. In 3 days, I had liquidated all our businesses, converted and dispersed our wealth, and hidden it away. Then I gathered all our core people and retreated into the space. Xiao Jue found nothing. He searched Misty Miasma like a madman, turning the entire city upside down, but he did not find so much as a strand of my hair. He mobilized the entire realm, issued wanted posters, and offered a fortune in gold for any clue of my whereabouts. But I had vanished like a drop of water into the ocean. Unable to find me, he vented his fury on anyone connected to me. The city lord of Misty Miasma was stripped of office for harboring me. Merchants who had done business with me had their properties confiscated. With my disappearance, the entire economy of Misty Miasma collapsed, the once thriving border city reverted to its former impoverished wasteland. But none of this brought him closer to me. Instead, it ignited widespread resentment. His throne grew ever more unstable. Rebellions erupted across the land. Border barbarians seized the chance to raid. He was stretched thin, overwhelmed. Meanwhile, I was living a leisurely life inside the space. Over these years, the space had evolved into a true little world. It had towns and villages. Our loyal followers and their families had all settled here, creating a self-sufficient paradise. A Chen and I lived in the little courtyard by the stream, reading, farming, raising our child. Occasionally, through my mental awareness, I would glance at Xiao Jue in the outside world. He grew gaunter and more volatile with each passing year. Often, he sat alone in his empty throne hall, muttering to himself. "Nian Nian, where are you? Come back, won't you? I was wrong. I was truly wrong." If you just return, I'll give you anything you want, even the Empress's throne. Remorse had begun to gnaw at him. But in this world, regret was the most useless of all things. Xiao Jue searched for me for 10 years. In that decade, he aged from a vigorous young emperor into a middle-aged man with graying temples. His empire was crumbling. His harem held 3,000 beauties, yet none could enter his heart. He had no heirs. Not because he could not sire children, but because none of his consorts could conceive. That was the little gift I had left him upon my departure. A colorless, odorless medicine from the space, one that rendered a man sterile forever. I wanted him to be utterly alone, to leave no legacy for the throne he had schemed so hard to win. I wanted him to see all the power he had strived for dissolve into nothing. One day, 10 years later, he finally caught a lead about me. In a small fishing village on the eastern coast, someone had reported seeing a handsome couple, the man sturdy, the woman stunning, accompanied by a boy of about 10, resembling the portraits on the wanted posters. Xiao Jue was ecstatic. Ignoring his courtier's objections, he once again led a personal expedition, this time to that fishing village. He did not bring a large army this time, only a few trusted attendants. He was afraid of scaring me away again. Travel-worn, he arrived at the village and found the little courtyard. The gate was ajar. With trembling hands, he pushed it open. In the yard, a graceful woman was mending fishing nets. A sturdy man was repairing a boat, and a half-grown boy chased a butterfly in play. A scene of tranquil beauty, like a painting. It was her. Truly her. In these 10 years, time seemed to have left no mark on her face. She was as beautiful and serene as ever. Nian nian. Xiao Jue's voice was cracked, raw, choked with tears. I turned and saw him. 10 years apart, he had aged so much. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, the white in his hair, all told of his misery during those years. I said nothing, only gazed at him quietly. Achin put down his tools and stepped before me, shielding me with his body. Our son, curious, ran up and peeked out from behind Achin's legs at this unfamiliar man. Nian Nian, I found you. I finally found you. Xiao Jue took a step toward me, tears streaming down his aged face. Come back with me, Nian Nian. I'll give you the throne, I'll give you the entire empire, I'll give you anything. Just please. Don't leave me again. He reached out to take my hand. Achin raised his arm, a wall of flesh and bone blocking his way. Your Majesty, please show some propriety. Achin said, his voice cold as steel. She is my wife now. Your wife? Xiao Jue laughed, as if he had heard the most absurd joke, or as if it had struck his most raw nerve. His eyes bloodshot, he glared at Achin with venomous hatred. What are you? A lowly guard. A servant I discarded. What right do you have? By right of loving her, honoring her, and protecting her, Achin said, each word firm and unyielding. While you only hurt her, abandon her, and use her. Those words drove like a blade into Xiao Jue's heart. He had no retort. Because everything Achin said was true. Nian nian. He could only turn his desperate gaze to me. At last, I spoke. Xiao Jue, go back. My voice was flat, devoid of feeling. You and I are finished. It has been finished since the moment you served me poisoned wine in your former life. No. It's not over. Xiao Jue screamed hysterically. I was reborn. I came back to make it up to you. We can start over. Start over? I laughed, a bitter, mocking laugh. Xiao Jue, your so-called making amends is nothing but your obsessive need for control. Your so-called love is merely a calculated choice. You never truly understood me, and you never truly loved me. What I wanted was never an empress's throne, never boundless power. I took Chen's hand and intertwined my fingers with his. What I wanted was a true partner, someone who knows my warmth and cold, who stands by me and protects me. And that, you could never give me. My words were the final straw. Xiao Jue swayed, his face deathly pale. He looked at our clasped hands, at our family of 3 so happy together, and the light in his eyes slowly died. At last, he understood. He had lost. Utterly, completely. What he had lost was not just a woman, but the one scrap of warmth he had ever known in 2 lifetimes. He. He. He started laughing, a terrible, desperate sound. The laughter turned to coughing, and a gush of blood burst from his mouth. He pitched backward, falling heavily. Your Majesty! His attendants rushed forward in panic. I watched it all with cold detachment, unmoved. From beginning to end, this had been his one-man show. And I had long since left the stage, becoming a spectator he could never reach again. Xiao Jue was rescued. But his health never recovered. His was a sickness of the heart, incurable. He languished on his sickbed, never to rise again. Without an heir, the succession became a lethal crisis. The brothers he had suppressed began to stir once more. The court sank into chaos. Lying in his cold dragon bed, he often dreamed. In his dreams, he returned to Prince Jing's mansion. That day, the day the Imperial guards surrounded the compound, he pushed open the gate of Heart's Rest Court. And I had not vanished. Instead, with tear-streaked face, I threw myself into his arms and wept, "My lord, I am so afraid." He held me tight and comforted me tenderly, "Fear not, I am here." Together, they were exiled. He did not abuse me, instead, he cared for me with all his heart. Together, they struggled in misty miasma. He managed external affairs, I managed the household, humble though their life was, it was happy. Then, he rose again and ascended the throne. He dismissed every consort and made me his sole empress. Hand in hand, he led me to the highest point of the Golden Hall and said, "Nian Nian, I conquered this empire for you." Then the dream ended. There was only the empty bedchamber, an endless, bottomless regret. He reached out his hand, grasping at nothing but void. "Nian Nian." He breathed his final 2 words, and closed his eyes forever. An emperor, died alone, consumed by endless remorse. The news of Xiao Jue's death soon spread across the land. I read it in the Space's newspaper. Yes, a newspaper. Over these 10 years, our space world had grown increasingly modern. We had schools, hospitals, factories, and even a newspaper and radio. Everyone here lived in peace, content and secluded. Chen had become the city lord of the small world, but he much preferred to be called Brother Chen. I ran an academy, teaching the children to read and write. Our son had grown into a bright, cheerful young man. He had inherited Chen's martial prowess and my wit, the most popular lad in the entire space. At the news of Xiao Jue's death, not a ripple stirred in my heart. To me, he was simply a long-forgotten figure from the past. What are you reading? Chen wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. He smelled of sunshine and fresh grass, a scent that always brought me profound peace. "Nothing," I said, leaning into him. "I was just thinking, what shall we have for dinner tonight?" "Hot pot," Chen murmured in my ear. "Your favorite." "Good." The golden light of dusk streamed through the window, enveloping us in warmth and stillness. Outside the window stretched verdant mountains, a crystalline stream, and boundless waves of golden wheat swaying in the breeze. A new era, our era, was only just beginning. And those old stories of the past had long since been carried away on the wind. The story is now complete. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe and support me.